Hello and welcome to Letters from the Editor. I'm the editor, Faith Moore, and today we're going to talk about how to use
quotation marks.
Who said that? Basically, quotation marks are used to indicate when words in your writing aren't yours, either because you're writing fiction and you want to indicate that your characters are speaking instead of the narrator, or because you're writing nonfiction and you want to indicate that a portion of the text is a quotation, someone else's words used to support your point. Quotation marks can also be used colloquially to imply an alternate meaning, like, wow, this video is so interesting. Most people understand that quotation marks go around the section of text that is dialogue or a quotation. So like, if a character says, oh my gosh, this video is so interesting, the quotation marks go around, oh my gosh, this video is so interesting. If you found a source that says only 1 in 10 videos about quotation marks are interesting, the quotation marks go around only 1 in 10 videos about quotation marks are interesting. The tricky part, and the reason you're watching this video, is what to do with everything around the quotation marks. Let's start with punctuation. In America, periods and commas always go inside the quotation marks, never outside. Never, ever outside. Please stop. Thank you. If the end of the quotation is also the end of your sentence, as in you're not adding anything of your own after the quotation, put a period inside the quotation marks and move on to the next sentence, like this. If the end of the quotation is not the end of your sentence, because you're going to add an attribution like said whoever, or just add more of your own words afterwards, put a comma inside the quotation marks and continue your sentence, like this. The only time you don't need a comma is if you're using the quotation as part of your own sentence. For example, something like, viewers call this video life-changing and watch it over and over. The quotation isn't set apart from the rest of the sentence. It makes up part of the sentence, so it doesn't need a comma after it. But since it's still someone else's words, it still needs quotation marks. In instances like this, you also don't need a comma before the quotation. Question marks and exclamation points are a little trickier, but there is actually a rule. You don't get to just make it up. Sorry. If the question mark or exclamation point is part of the quotation, either because it was in the piece of writing you're quoting or because you're using it to indicate the way your character is speaking, then it goes inside the quotation marks, like this. If the exclamation point or question mark is yours, it goes outside, like this. Things like dashes, colons, and semicolons that are not actually part of the quote always go outside the quotation marks. Phew! You with me so far? I can't actually hear you, so great! Moving right along. Let's talk about attributions. The attribution is the part where you tell us who said the thing in quotation marks. So in fiction, it's usually something like, he said, or said Aunt Petunia, or whatever. In nonfiction, it's where you tell us where the quote came from. Something like, in an article for a made-up newspaper, a rando I plucked off the street said, or whatever. If the attribution goes before the quotation, you generally put a comma after it, then open the quotation marks and write your quote, like this. If the attribution goes after the quotation marks, you put a comma inside the quotation marks, even if that's the end of the sentence, and then you put your attribution after the quotation marks, like this. This bears repeating. Even if the section in quotation marks is the end of a sentence, you don't put a period if you're going to put an attribution after it. You put a comma. The period goes after the attribution. However, just in case this sounded too easy, if the quote ends with a question mark or an exclamation point, you do put the question mark or exclamation point inside the quotation marks and then add the attribution, like this. But please note, even though a question mark or exclamation point would normally be the end of a sentence, the attribution does not have a capital letter. With me so far? Sure you are. Almost there, just a few more odds and ends. A quotation inside a quotation gets single quotation marks instead of double. And if the quotation is more than one paragraph, Don't put quotation marks at the end of the first paragraph, but do put quotation marks at the start of the next paragraph. Then put quotation marks at the end of the quotation. Finally, the only other time to use quotation marks is when you're using them to indicate an inaccuracy or alternate meaning. So, for example, if I said this video is so interesting with quotation marks only around interesting, I actually mean it's not really interesting at all. We do not ever do this for emphasis. Saying, for example, that you love this video means that you don't, not that you really, really love it, which is of course what you mean, right? I think that's it. Quotation marks are tricky, but knowing how to use them is pretty important for, looking like you know what you're doing. See what I did there? Questions? Other things you'd like me to explain? Drop them in the comments. Want to hire me to edit your writing? Visit my website, www.faithkmoore.com. Happy writing!